The cottage door did not splinter. It did not crack. It exploded inward, a shower of raw timber and iron hinges blasting into the small, warm room. Selene moved without thinking, a vessel for an instinct more ancient than stone. She threw herself over her son, her body a shield, her world narrowing to the scent of his hair and the terrified gasp that was stolen from his small lungs. The hunters had found them. After 6 years of borrowed peace, of ghosting through the shadowed edges of the kingdom, the hunt had finally come to their door. 2 figures filled the gaping hole where the door had been. They were clad in dark leather, their faces hidden behind expressionless masks of hardened hide. The glint of silver from their crossbows caught the flickering firelight, cold and merciless. Outside, the howl of a wolf cut through the night, a sound of agony and defeat. Brennan. Her heart seized. The old beater, the loyal soldier who had spirited her away from the capital on that night of ashes and betrayal, had fallen. He had been their wall, their guardian, and now he was gone. The boy, one of the assassins rasped, his voice a dead thing, devoid of emotion. Lord Van Thorn's orders. The bastard dies. The mother too. Selene's arms tightened around her son, Torin. She could feel his small body trembling, his face pressed into the rough wool of her tunic. He was 6 years old, a lifetime of secrets held in the impossible gold of his eyes, the exact shade of the father who did not know he existed, the father who had cast her aside. A burning ache flared on her hip, a familiar ghost of pain. It was the mark of their severed bond, a brand that had never stopped weeping. They said the Alpha King, Alaric, had gone mad. They whispered it in taverns and marketplaces, tales of a feral king who stalked the halls of his own castle, his eyes glowing with a fevered light. They said he was tearing the kingdom apart looking for a ghost, a scent on the wind, a memory he couldn't quite hold. Selene pressed a hand to her own chest, over the hollow echo where her heart used to feel whole. She knew the truth. He wasn't looking for a ghost. He was looking for her. And he was dying from the search. The first assassin raised his crossbow. The click of the trigger mechanism being armed was the loudest sound she had ever heard. This was it. The end of their stolen time. She buried her face in Torin's hair, whispering the ancient lullaby of the Moon Mother, a song of protection her own mother had sung to her. She had no magic, no wolf to call her own. She was nothing but a woman, a mother, with nothing left to offer but her own body as the final, useless barrier. Pathetic, the second assassin sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Hiding in a hovel with the Alpha's spawn. Did you really think he would ever want a nobody like you? Lady Lysara is his mate now, the true Lunar Queen. The name, Lysara, was a shard of ice in her soul. Lysara Van Thorn. The beautiful, cruel she-wolf with eyes like chips of obsidian. The one Alaric had chosen in the Great Hall, his voice booming and final, shattering Selene's world into a million pieces. She had watched from the servants' gallery, her hand on her still flat stomach, as the man she loved, her fated mate, claimed another. The agony of it had been a physical force, a wave of nausea and despair that had nearly sent her tumbling from the balcony. Brennan had found her moments later, his face grim, and told her they had to run. Now. The assassin took a step forward, the crossbow aimed directly at Torin's small, hidden form. Selene squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the impact, for the end of everything. But the bolt never came. Instead, a sound ripped through the night, a sound that was not wolf nor man, but something primal and full of earth-shattering rage. It was a roar that shook the very foundations of the cottage, that vibrated in Selene's bones and made the assassins freeze in place. The forest outside, once dark and silent, erupted. Trees snapped like twigs. The ground trembled. Then, the wall opposite them didn't just break, it disintegrated. A blur of midnight fur and incandescent rage. A wolf the size of a warhorse exploded into the room. It was a creature of nightmare and legend, a beast of pure alpha power. Its fur was the black of a starless sky, its muscles coiling like thick ropes of steel. And its eyes were molten gold, burning with a madness that promised to unmake the world. Alaric. The first assassin had no time to scream. The massive black wolf was on him in a heartbeat, jaws closing around his throat with a sound like a deadfall trap snapping shut. There was a spray of hot, dark blood, and the man was thrown across the room like a child's doll. The second assassin, paralyzed for a fatal second, finally fumbled to reload his weapon. He was too slow. Alaric's head whipped around, those golden eyes, Taurin's eyes, locking onto the threat. He moved, a shadow of impossible speed, and his claws, long and sharp as daggers, tore through leather and flesh. The man's scream was cut short as he fell, the crossbow clattering uselessly to the floor. The room fell silent, save for the heavy, ragged breathing of the great wolf. Blood dripped from his muzzle onto the floorboards, steaming in the cool night air. He stood over the bodies of the assassins, his massive chest heaving, the rage slowly beginning to recede from his gaze, replaced by a dawning, terrible confusion. His golden eyes swept the room, over the carnage, the shattered wall, and then they landed on her, on the small, trembling bundle in her arms. Slowly, painfully, the massive form began to shift. Bones cracked and reformed, fur receded, and the giant wolf collapsed into the shape of a man. King Alaric stood naked in the ruins of her home, his body a tapestry of scars, new and old. He was leaner than she remembered, harder, with a wildness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He was covered in the dust of travel and the blood of his enemies, his long black hair matted and tangled. He took a stumbling step toward her, his hand outstretched, his face a mask of disbelief and agonizing hope. "Celine?" he whispered, his voice raw, broken. It wasn't a question, it was a prayer. 6 years. 6 years of believing he had cast her away, that he had chosen power and status over the pull of their souls. 6 years of raising their son in secret, loving him with a ferocity that bordered on pain, always looking over her shoulder. And now, here he was, the mad king, the feral alpha, her mate. Behind him, through the shattered wall, another figure staggered into the light. Brennan. He was clutching his side, blood seeping through his fingers, but he was alive. His weathered face was filled with a grim relief. "My king," he rasped, before his legs gave out and he slumped against the broken doorframe. Alaric didn't seem to hear him. His entire world had shrunk to the woman huddled by the fireplace. He took another step, then another. The burning mark on his hip, the one that had tormented him for 6 years, was now a roaring inferno, a beacon pulling him home. The scent he had been chasing in his dreams, the scent of moonlight and wild herbs, filled his lungs, clearing the fog of madness that had shrouded his mind. "They told me you were dead," he choked out, his voice thick with unshed tears. "They showed me your cloak, covered in blood, found at the river's edge. They said rogues had taken you." Selene could only stare, her mind reeling. Dead? They had told him she was dead? The carefully constructed walls around her heart began to crumble. The assassin's words echoed in her mind. Lady Lysara is his mate now. It hadn't been a choice. It had been a lie. All of it. Just then, Taurin, who had been frozen in silent terror, stirred in her arms. He peeked out from behind her shoulder, his small face pale. And his eyes, his brilliant, unmistakable golden eyes, met his father's. The world stopped. Alaric froze, his gaze locked on the boy. The confusion, the rage, the grief, it all vanished, replaced by a single, soul-shaking wave of recognition. He saw his own face in the boy's features, his own lineage in the proud set of his small jaw. He saw the truth. He fell to his knees in the ruin of the cottage, amidst the blood and the splintered wood. His trembling hand hovered in the air, not daring to bridge the distance. "May I?" he whispered, his voice cracking, his golden eyes pleading with her. Selene gave a shaky nod, her own tears finally breaking free, tracing silent paths through the soot on her cheeks. Alaric reached out, his calloused fingers, the fingers of a king and a warrior, touching Torin's face with a reverence she had never seen. The moment his skin met his son's, a jolt, a current of pure belonging passed between them. A violent kick of recognition, not from a womb, but from a bloodline finally made whole. And the Alpha King, the feral beast who had torn through walls and men, wept. He bowed his head, his shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs, his hand cupping the face of the son he never knew he had. The hollow ache in Selene's chest, the constant companion of her lonely years, was suddenly filled with a blinding, terrifying hope. The bond, stretched thin and frayed by lies and time, did not just snap back into place. It ignited. A searing heat flared on her hip, so intense it made her gasp, and she knew he felt it too. It was not a healing. It was a reforging in the fires of reunion and rage. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken years. Alaric remained on his knees, his gaze fixed on Torin, as if memorizing every detail of the child he had been denied. Torin, in turn, stared back with a child's unfiltered curiosity, his fear slowly giving way to a strange sense of recognition, a pull he couldn't understand, but felt in his very bones. It was the call of the blood, the song of the pack. Finally, Alaric lifted his head, his tear-streaked face turning to Selene. The madness was gone from his eyes, replaced by a clarity that was almost more frightening. It was the clarity of a king who had been betrayed, a mate who had been robbed, and a father who had just discovered the treasure that had been stolen from him. "Lysara," he said, the name a curse on his tongue. "She did this. She told me you had fled the capital in a fit of jealousy after the announcement, that you were unstable. Then, a week later, her trackers, they found your cloak by the Blackwood River. It was torn, bloodied. They said you were gone." His voice dropped to a low, dangerous growl. "She mourned with me. She held me as I grieved. She comforted me." The pieces clicked into place, each one a fresh stab of pain and fury. Lysara hadn't just wanted to be Lunar. She had wanted to erase Selene completely, to build her reign on the foundation of a lie cemented by Selene's supposed death. Brennan, still leaning heavily against the wall, coughed, a pained grimace on his face. "It was her men who ambushed us on the road that night, my king," the old beta managed to say, his voice strained. "Not rogues. House Van Thorn guards, their colors hidden. They weren't trying to kill us. They were trying to drive us off, to make it look like she had fled. I saw the sigil on one of their daggers. I knew then that this was more than a simple rejection. It was a coup." Alaric's hands clenched into fists, the knuckles white. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with his barely contained power. "She will pay for this. She will pay for every tear you shed, for every year I lost. I will burn House Van Thorn to the ground." Selene gently eased Torin from her lap, urging him to his feet. She stood, her legs shaky but her resolve hardening into steel. "First, we need to help Brennan. He's badly wounded." She moved toward the old wolf, her focus shifting to the immediate need. Her training with the village healer, Marta, over the past few years, had given her some skill with wounds and herbs. As she knelt beside Brennan, Alaric rose and crossed the room in 2 long strides. He knelt opposite her, his presence a wall of heat and power. He ripped a strip of cloth from the tattered remains of a curtain and pressed it against Brennan's side, his touch surprisingly gentle. "He'll live," Alaric said, his voice a low rumble. His eyes met Selene's over Brennan's prone form. "My royal guard is half a day behind me. I outran them. I felt it. Your fear. It was like a knife in my soul. I've been following a ghost for 6 years, Selene. A scent I could never place. A feeling of wrongness. The bond sickness, the healers called it. They said my wolf was rejecting the false mate, Lysara, that it was slowly driving me mad because it couldn't find its true mate. They thought my true mate was dead. They gave me drafts of wolfsbane and silverleaf to dull the ache, to keep the feral side at bay. Now it all made sense. The rumors of his madness. The poison hadn't just been to make him choose Lysara. It was an ongoing treatment, a chemical cage to suppress his wolf and the bond itself. They were slowly killing him, body and soul. "It wasn't just the bond sickness," she whispered, her voice trembling with a new fury. "That night, in the Great Hall, you were not yourself. Your eyes, they were clouded." Alaric's face darkened with a terrible, dawning comprehension. He looked down at his own hands, then back at her. "The wine, before the ceremony. Lysara brought me a goblet of ceremonial wine. She said it was a tradition, to toast to the future of the pack." He let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "I drank it. And the next thing I remember clearly is waking up 3 days later in my chambers, with her sitting by my bed, telling me you were gone. The ceremony itself, it's a blur, a nightmare I can't grasp." "I did not choose her," Alaric roared, the sound so full of anguish and fury that the floorboards vibrated. The last of the fog in his mind seemed to burn away in the heat of his rage. "I was drugged, poisoned. I woke up 3 days later screaming your name, and she told me you were dead." The truth of it hung in the air, monstrous and undeniable. A political marriage forced by poison. A fated mate cast aside through deception. A secret heir hunted by assassins. It was a web of treason spun by a spider who now sat on a stolen throne. "My king," Brennan rasped, his eyes fluttering open. "The capital. It is loyal to Van Thorn now. Lysara and her father have spent 6 years consolidating their power. They control the council. They command the city guard. To march on them now, it would be civil war." "It is a war I will gladly start," Alaric snarled, his eyes flashing gold. "She has my son. She has my mate. She has my throne. I will take them all back, or I will die." Selene placed a calming hand on his arm. His skin was fever hot, thrumming with power. When she touched him, the searing heat on her hip pulsed in time with his heartbeat. "We will take it back," she said, her voice quiet but firm, a strange new strength blooming in her chest. "But not with blind rage. We will do it with the truth." He looked at her, truly looked at her. For the first time since the chaos had begun, he saw not the timid servant girl he had fallen in love with, the one who would blush and look away when he caught her eye in the castle gardens. He saw a woman forged in hardship, a mother whose love was a weapon, and a queen who did not yet know she wore a crown. "How?" he asked, his voice softening, deferring to her in a way he never had before. "The old ways," she said, her mind racing. "The pack laws are clear. A forced bond is no bond at all. A challenge can be issued. The truth, witnessed by the pack, is the ultimate law." She looked from Alaric's determined face to Torin, who was now standing hesitantly by the hearth, watching them with wide, intelligent eyes. "She has built her power on lies. We will tear it down with the one thing she cannot fight, a living, breathing heir, with the eyes of the true king." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Alaric's face. It was the smile of a predator who had finally scented the path to his prey. "They thought they could break me. They thought they could erase you. But they made one fatal mistake." "What's that?" Selene asked. He reached out and gently brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, his touch sending a cascade of sparks down her spine. "They underestimated the power of a true mate bond. It may have been damaged, but it was never broken. It led me here, and now it will lead us home." The journey back to the capital was a blur of calculated haste. Alaric's royal guard, a cohort of 50 wolves fiercely loyal to his bloodline, met them at dawn. Their shock at seeing Selene alive was eclipsed only by their stunned reverence for Torin. The boy with the Alpha King's eyes was a living symbol, a rallying cry made flesh. They traveled swiftly, and for the most part silently, a grim procession cutting through the heart of the kingdom Alaric had nearly lost. Brennan, his wound bound tightly, rode in a litter, his counsel proving as vital as any sword. He knew the political landscape of the capital, who had been bought by Van Thorn gold, and who still held a secret loyalty to the true king. They bypassed the main roads, using ancient pack trails known only to the royal line, their movements a secret whispered on the wind. During the long nights, huddled around campfires, Selene and Alaric began to piece together the shattered fragments of their lives. He would watch her with an intensity that made her skin hum, an apology in his eyes so profound it needed no words. He learned every detail of Torin's 6 years of life, his first word, his favorite hiding spot in the woods, the way he would hum the Moon Mother's lullaby when he thought no one was listening. Each story was a fresh wound to Alaric's soul, another year stolen from him by Lysara's treachery. He told her of his own hell, of the bond sickness that felt like his soul was being scraped out with a dull knife, of the phantom scent of her that he would chase through the castle halls like a madman. He described the suffocating presence of Lysara, her touch like ice against his skin, her voice a constant grating lie. The wolfsbane they'd given him had kept his own wolf, his very essence, caged and confused, unable to fight the deception that ensnared his human mind. One evening, as Torin slept soundly by the fire, his small hand clutching a wooden wolf Alaric had carved for him, Selene sat beside her mate. The mark on her hip was a constant warm presence now, a comforting hum instead of a burning ache. "She called me a nobody," Selene said quietly, staring into the flames. "The assassin. He said you would never want a nobody like me. For a long time I believed it. I was just a servant from a border village. My family had no name, no power." Alaric turned, his expression fierce in the firelight. He took her hand, his thumb stroking the back of it. "You were never a nobody, Selene. From the first moment I saw you, arranging flowers in the great hall, my wolf recognized you. It saw the light in you. I didn't care about your status. I cared about the way your laughter sounded like wind chimes, the way you showed kindness to everyone, from the lowest stable hand to the highest-ranking lord. I was courting you in my own clumsy way. I was going to defy the council, defy the arranged pairing with Lizara. I was going to choose you. Her heart ached with the truth of his words, with the future they had almost had. I thought you gave in, that the pressure from the council, from her father, was too much. When you made the announcement, I felt our bond tear. It wasn't a tear, he said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. It was a blade. I felt it too. A searing pain, and then a fog. Her poison didn't just cloud my memory. It severed the connection, or tried to. It built a wall between my mind and my wolf. But it couldn't destroy the foundation. My wolf knew. It never stopped howling for you. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. You have a strength Lizara could never comprehend. The strength to survive. The strength to protect our son. The strength to hide in the shadows and keep our legacy alive. You are not a nobody, Selena. You are the other half of my soul. You are my queen. His words wrapped around her, a balm on wounds she hadn't even realized were still bleeding. In the eyes of her king, her mate, she finally began to see herself not as a discarded servant, but as the woman he described. A quiet strength, one she had mistaken for weakness, began to solidify within her. It was the resilience of a river stone, worn smooth but not broken by the relentless current. They arrived at the outskirts of the capital under the cloak of a new moon. The city loomed before them, a beast of stone and shadow. Brennan's intelligence was grim. Lizara, catching wind of a possible challenge, had sealed the city gates. The walls were patrolled by Vanthorn men, their wolf-head sigil a stark symbol of their usurped authority. She was trying to brand Alaric an invader in his own kingdom. She's playing politics, Brennan grunted from his litter. Declaring the king a feral outcast, influenced by a common witch. She'll try to turn the neutral packs against you before you can even speak. Then we won't give her the chance, Alaric declared. He turned to his most trusted captain. We don't go through the gates. We go under them. The old aqueduct escape route. My grandfather built it. Only the royal bloodline knows the entrance. Their infiltration of the city was silent and tense. The tunnels were damp and smelled of moss and old stone, a secret artery pumping the true king back into the heart of his kingdom. They emerged into the cellars of the royal kitchens, the familiar scents of baking bread and roasting meat, a strange contrast to the tension that crackled in the air. The castle staff, many of whom had served Alaric's family for decades, stared in shock, their eyes wide with fear and a dawning dangerous loyalty. Whispers spread like wildfire. The king has returned. The dead woman lives. The golden-eyed heir is with them. Their destination was the Great Hall. It was the heart of the pack, the place where all laws were made and all challenges were heard. It was where Celine's heart had been broken, and it was where she would see it restored. Alaric's guard moved with practiced efficiency, securing the corridors, their movements a silent, deadly ballet. As they approached the massive oak doors of the hall, they could hear voices from within. Lizara was holding court. Her voice, smooth and cloying as poisoned honey, drifted through the wood. And so we must remain vigilant, she was saying. This feral creature claiming to be your king is a danger to us all. He is a rabid animal, his mind twisted by the wiles of the servant girl who lured him into the wilderness. She was a known practitioner of blood magic, a nobody who sought to climb to a station she did not deserve. For the safety of the pack, they must be hunted down and purged. Alaric's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. A low growl rumbled in his chest. a promise of the violence to come. Selene placed her hand on his, her touch a silent plea for restraint. Not with rage, she reminded him with her eyes. With truth. He took a deep breath, reining in his fury. He looked at Torin, who stood beside him, his small face set with a courage that mirrored his father's. Then, with a nod to his guards, Alaric threw open the doors to the great hall. The scene within was one of opulent deceit. Lysara sat upon the Alpha's throne, a throne carved from the heartwood of a single ancient oak. She was dressed in shimmering silver, looking every bit the queen she pretended to be. Her father, the calculating Lord Varian Van Thorn, stood beside her, his hand resting on the back of the throne as if he owned it. The hall was filled with pack alphas and elders, their faces a mixture of confusion, fear, and dawning allegiance to the woman on the throne. Every head turned as the doors crashed open. A collective gasp swept through the hall. There stood Alaric, not as a feral beast, but as their king, tall and imposing, his golden eyes blazing with righteous fury. Beside him stood Selene, no longer a servant in the shadows, but a woman radiating a quiet, unyielding strength. And between them, holding both their hands, was the boy. The boy with the Alpha King's golden eyes. The truth needed no words. It was there for all to see. The living, breathing proof of Lysara's lie. Lysara's face for a fleeting moment was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling before her very eyes. But she was a creature of cunning. The shock was quickly replaced by a sneer of practiced disdain. "Well, well," she said, her voice dripping with venom, though a slight tremor betrayed her fear. "The dead have returned, and they've brought their little bastard with them. Guards, seize this impostor and the witch who controls him." The Van Thorn guards, positioned around the hall, hesitated. They looked from Lysara, their current commander, to Alaric, their rightful king. They saw the golden-eyed boy. Doubt was a seed, and it had just been planted in fertile ground. "I am Alaric of the House of Grimm, true alpha of this pack," Alaric's voice boomed, resonating with the ancient power of his bloodline. It was a voice that commanded obedience. "And this is my true mate, Selene, and our son, Torin, the heir to this throne." He pointed a finger at Lysara. "This woman, Lysara Van Thorn, is a usurper and a traitor. She poisoned me to force a false bond. She lied to me and to you, claiming my mate was dead. She has ruled this pack through deceit and dishonor." Lord Van Thorn stepped forward, his face purple with rage. "Lies! These are the ravings of a madman. My daughter is the true Lunar, bonded to him before this entire pack." "A bond forged by wolfsbane and lies is no bond at all," Alaric roared back. "I challenge you, by the old laws, let the truth be witnessed." The hall erupted into chaos. Lords and ladies shouted, some calling for loyalty to Lysara, others swayed by the powerful truth of Alaric's presence. Lysara saw her power slipping through her fingers. Her allies were wavering. The neutral parties were looking at the golden-eyed boy and seeing the future of the pack, a future she could not offer. Desperation made her reckless. This was her critical mistake. In a flash of movement, she drew a small, wicked-looking dagger from a sheath hidden in her dress. It wasn't aimed at Alaric or Selene. She lunged, not for a warrior, but for the easiest, most vulnerable target. She bypassed the guards and grabbed the frail form of Marta, the old pack healer, who had been standing near the front, her face alight with vindicated joy. Lysara pressed the silver blade to the old woman's throat. "Silence!" she shrieked, her voice high and shrill. "One more word and the old crone dies. This is what your truth gets you, Alaric. Bloodshed! Her eyes, wild and cornered, darted around the hall. She was losing. She knew it. She needed to regain control, to remind them of her power. Her gaze fell on Torin, who was clinging to Celine's leg, his eyes wide with fear. A cruel, venomous smile twisted her lips. Or perhaps, she hissed, her eyes locking onto Selene, I should take something from you. Something that will make you truly understand what it means to lose. You want to be queen, little servant? A queen must know sacrifice. She started to drag Marta towards Selene and Torin. Give me the boy. Give me the bastard, and the old woman lives. She was threatening a child. In front of the entire pack, in front of his mother. It was the final, unforgivable sin. Something inside Selene, a dam holding back an ocean of dormant power, did not just crack. It shattered. The protective instinct of a mother, the most powerful force in the universe, merged with an ancient magic that had slept in her bloodline for 1,000 years. It was the magic of the Moon Mother, the magic of creation and protection, and it answered the call of her desperate heart. Pain exploded, not from a weapon, but from within. It was a fire in her bones, a torrent of power flooding every cell. Golden light, blinding and pure, flooded the room, erupting from her in a shockwave that threw back the nearest guards and made Lysara stumble. The air crackled with ozone and the scent of moonlight. Where Selene had stood, a frail human woman, a creature of myth now towered. It was a wolf, but a wolf like none had seen outside of the oldest tapestries. It was massive, larger even than Alaric's alpha form, with a coat as pure and white as freshly fallen snow. Its eyes were not gold or blue, but pools of liquid silver that glowed with an ancient, terrifying intelligence. She caught the wrist of the hand holding the dagger, not with claws, but with a human-like hand that was now covered in white fur. Her grip was unbreakable steel. The great hall was struck silent. Even Alaric, in his human form, stared in awe and wonder. The legends were true. The bloodline of the first Lunar, the white wolf of the moon, had not died out. It had been sleeping, waiting, in her. The white wolf that was Selene did not growl. She did not snarl. She simply looked at Lysara, and in that gaze was the weight of 1,000 generations of maternal fury. The power rolling off her was immense, a physical pressure that brought lesser wolves to their knees. It was not the aggressive dominance of an alpha, but the absolute, unquestionable authority of a goddess. Lysara trembled, the dagger clattering from her nerveless fingers. The haughty, mocking demeanor was gone, replaced by raw, primal fear. She was staring at a being of pure magic, a force of nature she had foolishly provoked. She tried to speak, to beg, but no sound came out. Her arrogance, her political maneuvering, her schemes, they were all meaningless in the face of this radiant, lethal power. Selene, the wolf, released her wrist, tossing her aside like a piece of trash. Lysara scrambled backward on the floor, her silver dress stained with dust, her face a mask of pathetic terror. Selene then turned her silver eyes, now softened with concern, to Marta, nudging the old healer gently with her nose to ensure she was unharmed. A slow, powerful shift began, the golden light receding, the massive form contracting. In moments, Selene stood once more in human form, the light of her transformation still clinging to her like an aura. Her simple tunic seemed to shimmer, and her eyes held a new, regal depth. She was no longer hiding, no longer afraid. She was who she was always meant to be. She walked to the center of the hall, her gaze sweeping over the stunned faces of the pack lords. Her voice, when she spoke, was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room, imbued with her newfound power. "The law has been broken," she said, her voice calm and clear as a bell. A child of the Alpha was threatened. The pack was endangered by a false Lunar's greed. There is only one punishment for such treason. She looked at Alaric, who was now gazing at her with a love and reverence that eclipsed everything else. He walked to her side, taking her hand and raising it for all to see. "This is your true Lunar Queen," he proclaimed, his voice ringing with pride and absolute conviction. "Selene of the House of Grimm, the blood of the Moon Mother reborn. Her word is my word. Her judgment is my judgment." He turned his blazing golden eyes on Lisara, who was now being held by his royal guards. Her father, Lord Vara, stood frozen, his face ashen, his entire world of ambition turned to dust. "Lisara Van Thorn, Vara Van Thorn." Alaric's voice was cold as iron. "You are stripped of your name and rank. You are found guilty of high treason, attempted murder of an heir, and the poisoning of your Alpha. You will not be executed. Death is too kind. You will be exiled, cast out into the barren lands as rogues, with no pack to protect you, no name to call your own. You will live out your days as the very thing you despise. Nobodies. Let every wolf in this kingdom know the price of your ambition." The sentence was passed. There was no argument, no dissent. The entire pack had witnessed the truth. They had seen the golden-eyed heir. They had seen the miracle of the white wolf. They bowed their heads, not in submission to a king, but in awe of a queen. The reclamation was complete. The reign of lies was over. In the quiet aftermath, as the Van Thorns were dragged from the hall to face their fate, a new era began. The Great Hall, once a place of Celine's deepest heartbreak, was now the site of her ascension. The pack lords and ladies, one by one, came forward to pledge their fealty, not just to Alaric, but to her. They saw in her not just a powerful magical being, but the embodiment of the pack's heart, protective, nurturing, and fierce when provoked. Later that night, long after the celebrations had quieted, Celine stood on a balcony overlooking the silent city. The cool night air felt like a balm on her spirit. The castle was theirs again. Their family was safe, their future bright. But one final piece was missing. A quiet footstep behind her announced Alaric's presence. He came to stand beside her, his warmth a comforting shield against the chill. "I still can't believe it," he said, his voice soft with wonder. "A white wolf. The legends my mother used to tell me. I thought they were just stories to help me sleep." "I thought so too," Celine admitted. "I never felt anything. No magic, no inner wolf. Nothing. Until she threatened Torin. It was like she kicked down a door inside me I never knew was there." "It was your love for him," Alaric said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's the most powerful magic of all. It awoke the wolf. It saved us." He turned to face her, taking both of her hands in his. The moonlight cast his handsome features in silver and shadow. His golden eyes were soft, filled with a deep, abiding love. "Our bond is restored," he said. "But it is not yet complete. The lies and the poison left a scar on it. It must be formally sealed. The bite. The final claim." He looked at her, his expression vulnerable, asking for permission. This would not be a claiming of possession, but one of mutual acceptance, of two halves finally, formally becoming one. Celine's heart swelled. This was the moment she had dreamed of, the moment that had been stolen from them. "Yes," she whispered, her voice full of all the love and longing she had suppressed for 6 long years. "Claim me," he whispered, his voice husky with need, baring his throat to her in an act of ultimate trust and submission. It was the Alpha King offering himself to his queen. "Make it complete." But Selene shook her head gently. "No," she said, her voice firm. "We claim each other." She tilted her own head, baring the delicate skin at the junction of her neck and shoulder. He mirrored the movement. It was an act of equals, of 2 souls meeting in the middle. He leaned in, his breath warm against her skin, and she did the same. At the same moment, they bit down. She sank her teeth into the junction of his neck and shoulder, a sharp, clean bite that was not meant to harm, but to mark. He did the same to her. A jolt of pure energy, white hot and brilliant, shot through them. It was not pain, but ecstasy. The frayed edges of their bond didn't just heal. They were woven together with threads of silver and gold, creating something stronger and more radiant than before. The burning marks on their hips faded, replaced by a gentle, permanent warmth. 2 halves of a soul became one. When they pulled back, they were both breathless. The world seemed brighter, the air richer. He could feel her joy as if it were his own, and she could feel the profound peace that had finally settled in his soul. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closing. "My mate," he breathed, the words a reverent vow. "My love," she answered. Their coronation was a week later. It was not a somber political affair, but a joyous celebration of the pack's renewed spirit. Selene did not wear silver or gold, but a simple gown of deep midnight blue, the color of the sky that heralded the moon. She needed no jewels to prove her status. The power that radiated from her was crown enough. As she walked down the aisle of the great hall, with Torrin holding her hand on one side and Alaric waiting for her at the throne, she was not a servant or a hidden mother. She was Selene, the White Wolf, the Moon Mother, the Lunar Queen. When Alaric placed the simple silver circlet of the Lunar on her head, the pack howled, a joyous, unified sound that shook the very stones of the castle. It was a sound of healing, of hope, of a family and a kingdom made whole again. Torrin, standing between the 2 thrones, beamed, his golden eyes shining with a joy so pure it brought tears to the eyes of the oldest warriors. He was no longer a secret or a bastard, but the beloved prince, the living symbol of his parents' unbreakable love. That night, in the quiet of their royal chambers, as Torrin slept soundly in an adjoining room, Alaric and Selene stood by the window, looking out at the moon-drenched kingdom. Their kingdom. Alaric wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. His hand came to rest on her stomach, a gesture of instinct and hope for the future. "I wasted so much time," he murmured into her hair. 6 years of agony, chasing a ghost, when you were real, you were alive. Selene turned in his arms, placing her hands on his chest, over his steadily beating heart. "We didn't lose those years, Alaric," she said softly. "They forged us. They made me the mother I needed to be. They made you the king who would burn down the world for his family. And they gave us him." She glanced toward Torrin's room. "They gave us the best part of ourselves." He leaned down and captured her lips in a kiss that was full of promise, of quiet nights and shared dawns, of a future filled with love and laughter. It was a kiss that sealed not just a bond, but a lifetime. The Mad King had been healed, the hidden queen had been found, and the rejected servant had taken her rightful place on the throne, not through power or politics, but through the fierce, unyielding magic of a mother's love. Their story would become a legend, whispered to pups for generations to come. The tale of the Alpha King and his White Wolf Queen, a testament to the fact that you can't fight fate, and that true love is always worth burning a kingdom down for. And in the quiet peace of their chambers, with their son sleeping safely nearby and a kingdom finally at peace, they knew their greatest adventures were only just beginning.